Hi, thank you everyone. I'm co-presenting today with Julia Rose from the Nature Conservancy, but just want to acknowledge all of the many people that have been involved in this effort. And today we're going to be talking to you about building capacity for coral restoration in Hawaii. Before we get into Hawaii focus, I just want to give you guys some background of the impetus for this project. We had a request through the All Islands Committee of the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force that they really wanted resources and technical expertise to help with coral restoration planning in American Samoa, CNMI, Guam, and Hawaii. So I work for NOAA's Restoration Center, and we were lucky enough to enter into a cooperative agreement with the Nature Conservancy to help with that process. And we are at the end now. We're in the final stretch. We're entering year 4, but it was really to help provide those resources and technical knowledge for each place to develop a coral restoration action plan. And then the second two components of the project were focused on implementation in the main Hawaiian Islands. So providing additional science and as well as implementing pilot projects, which Julia will get into in her portion of the talk. So this was really catalyzed by the local jurisdiction in each place. So for Hawaii, that was the Division of Aquatic Resources, which created a small planning team, and we used the Reef Resilience Network Manager's Guide, which I understand they're passing out for free at this conference. So see Sherry and Michelle. Oh, Michelle's. Which is a 4-step planning process. And due to COVID, it took a lot longer than we thought, but it had us identify a restoration goal that we worked through all the steps with. And again, many mentors from Reef Resilience Network, technical experts really provided some help to the team. And just this last bullet I wanted to highlight, we also had a partnership with Symbioses, which was really great because it provided these vulnerability assessments that helped us in our site selection. So thinking about, again, if these were climate resilient plans, where did we have higher probability of coral survivorship into the future? So for Hawaii, the priority goal we decided to walk through the planning process for really was in response to our recent bleaching events and subsequent mortality. So really trying to apply restoration methods to enhance the resistance and recovery of coral reefs. But I also want to draw your attention to the beginning part of this phrase, which is the session we're in. Everybody involved really wanted to acknowledge this building capacity portion. So coral restoration has been happening in Hawaii, but at a smaller scale, and really wanting to try and collaborate more, exchange knowledge, and really continue to create that base of restoration practitioners in the main Hawaiian Islands. So we do have our draft action plan completed for this goal, and what we've been focusing on this year is now some conversations with the stakeholders and the community members of the 5 priority geographic areas. I won't get into the weeds of the plan because we really wanted to focus on the approach for today's talk. But these are still pretty large geographic focus areas, so this plan is not at the site level yet. That's going to be the result of a site-specific planning process, really hand in hand with the communities of the place to figure out more at the restoration scale level what will happen. And also a great outcome of this process was the science support. So as the planning team was wrapping up, we created a restoration science team to bring together kind of a different group of people around the table and try and provide some of that science support, not just for implementation in the priority areas, but across the main Hawaiian Islands. So we have an online restoration siting tool. We've been discussing monitoring metrics. We've had guest speakers from around the world to, again, try and bring some of the knowledge into Hawaii. It's a very different place, but trying to figure out how we can utilize some of the knowledge that's been gained elsewhere. Now I'll turn it over to Julie to talk more about the site-specific planning level.
Thanks, Shannon. I'm really glad to be able to share a little bit more about the place-based planning that came after our statewide planning process, and that was deliberate, like Shannon talked about. There was an acknowledgement on the statewide planning team that you're really not going to get to site-based planning on a statewide scale because, you know, the reefs in West Hawaii are different from the reefs in Maui Nui, are different from the reefs on Oahu. But almost more importantly, the communities and people in those places have a very deep connection, understanding, and sort of history of managing and caring for each of their places. So stakeholder engagement in place-based planning for restoration was really essential, an essential part of the planning process for each place, but sort of a little more on that later. So starting with, digging down into these two areas in West Hawaii, this is where we are starting some pilot restoration projects. And so starting with why we selected Ka'upulehu and Kealakekua. So from the data and modeling perspective, these areas were some that rose to the top with regards to the conditions that could contribute to the success of restoration. So both of these areas are currently protected from fishing and have higher herbivore biomass than other places. There are relatively low additional inputs like land-based sources of pollution in these places, and really the biggest driver of reef decline has been the 2015 bleaching event, which gets back to our overall goal, which is to build capacity to conduct restoration in areas that are affected by bleaching. And when I'm talking about bleaching in Hawaii, what exactly did that effect look like? I'll go through a couple examples here. Here's a photo from the Division of Aquatic Resources, some of their permanent monitoring transects at Ka'upulehu in 2011, and here's what it looked like in 2017. So we're not only seeing mortality of coral, we're seeing degradation of the underlying structure. And similarly, in Kealakekua, here's one of DAR's permanent monitoring transects, and this is kind of a fun one. You can keep an eye on the two Posilopra colonies there as a reference, and this is what it looked like in 2017. So overall, in West Hawaii, we lost just about half of our relative coral cover in 2015. So these sites met all of those criteria that we were looking for in a pilot restoration site, as far as low additional impacts outside of that thermally driven bleaching event. But these were not the only sites in West Hawaii that met all of those criteria. There were other places that sort of suited that as well. So another driving factor to start in these places was actually our community partnerships. So our community networks and partnerships in West Hawaii, there are many. Each of these places has an extremely active network of community leaders and partners who have been contributing to and driving management discussions in their areas. In Ka'upulehu, we have the Ka'upulehu Marine Life Advisory Committee, and in Kealakekua, we have the Community Action Planning Group. And so we've been conducting outreach from the start of the statewide planning process to communities across West Hawaii, and the people of these places were really the ones who have been asking for this kind of work to start for a really long time. So once our sites were selected across the state, we convened small huis or planning groups to help plan restoration for their area. And the goal of this was to bring together managers, researchers, and community leaders to merge the best available science with local, place-based, and indigenous knowledge to plan pilot projects that would be most appropriate for these areas. So why do we do this? It is not a small amount of effort to convene multiple series of workshops in each of these areas to plan restoration at a pilot scale. It is because, and we already have a substantial amount of data and monitoring and modeling that Shannon mentioned that could help us make decisions for these areas. And it's really because we have learned this lesson in Hawaii time and time again, that when you engage the people of place from the beginning with an opportunity that they can help to shape in the way that is the most appropriate for their place, that work has a much higher chance of success, of longevity, and of support from within the community. It's honestly because of that moment in a workshop when all of your monitoring or all of your modeling might be pointing to a certain area that might be the best place to do outplanting, and a community member says, you know, the last time the tsunami came through, like that area actually had a lot of rock fall from the cliff face, and you might consider planting corals somewhere else. Or even honestly, you know, so helping us understand where not to plant corals, but also where might mean the most to the community to plant corals. Things like, you know, my family has been harvesting and cultivating pearl oysters in this particular area for generations. And now those pearl oysters are not there because their habitat, the coral reefs, are also not there. So it would mean a lot to us to start restoration in this habitat. Things like that. So incorporating cultural context as well, and also incorporating cultural context in and understanding that planning to work with coral in Hawaii is not just planning to work with the foundational species of an ecosystem, but also as the first ancestor in the Native Hawaiian genealogy, and having sort of the emphasis and reverence and respect for proposing what we're doing. And finally, it is to build capacity, which is, again, what Shannon has talked about, what our whole goal is about, and what this session is really emphasizing. And starting with the people of place can help to support that process. So we'd like to leave you with this olelo to reflect upon, and wanted to thank all of the partners here that were in the core planning team on the statewide planning team. It's been a long haul, but we have a statewide plan, and we're working on place-based planning, and implementation is the next step. So thank you.